Hey, hi, how are you? My name's Phil, and welcome back to some Destiny 2. Today we're going to be doing some Titan builds. There's going to be 4 builds in this video, and I'm going to quick mention 2 honorable mentions inside of it as well. The links for the actual builds will be down in the description, including an alternate version of one of them. As is tradition, artifacts are not working in dim right now, so make sure you scroll through the video and find the artifacts if you want to make sure that you're using the right artifacts for each of these builds, because artifact mods do matter a lot right now. But let's hop right into things. Our first build up is going to be very much a classic. It is going to be a prismatic Titan consecration build, but because of the fact that we have access to so many artifacts, there's actually a handful of different versions of this running around, and I'm going to be going over the most classic, the one that uses Spirit of Inmost Light and Spirit of Synthoceps. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to talk about optional pivots for this. I actually think the more important part is that you have Spirit of Inmost Light on the class item, because there's quite a few other spirits that can be in the other slot that can make the build work pretty well. However, if you care more about melee damage and you don't want to farm out the exotic class item, just put on actual factual Synthoceps. It will work out just fine. As for the subclass, we are obviously on Prismatic Titan. The super is very much a dealer's choice type thing. I personally really like running Twilight Arsenal as my super because I just find it to be an incredibly strong super. And if I'm not rocking Cuirass of the Falling Star, I'd rather not use Thunder Crash. You could also argue that if you want this to be a super ad clear build, you could have on Blade Fury or Hammer of Soul or Glacial Quake as your optional super, but I'm just a big Twilight Arsenal fan. I like having my super do big boom, big damage. As for our abilities, I really like using Thruster. It has the shortest cooldown, and to be fair, we're never going to be sitting behind a wall anyways, because of how this build plays. Jump-wise, I prefer Catapult Lift. This is kind of personal preference though. I don't play enough Titan to have a strong opinion. Melee-wise, use Frenzied Blade because it gives you extra melee charges. Grenade-wise, you have 2 options in my opinion. You have Shackle Grenade if you want to make sure that you just lock everything down in an AoE, or Glacier Grenade if you want to have more explosions, more AoE damage going on in your build. I prefer Shackle to lock stuff down better. It's up to you, dear viewer. Our first aspect up is Amplified, critically wounding or breaking a shield of a target. Infuses your melee attacks with Arc Energy and increases your melee range and melee damage, which is just nice. It stacks on top of other bonuses we have. And defeating targets with melee attacks makes you Amplified and restores a portion of your health. In case you don't know, Amplified actually provides damage reduction at the moment because of just some change they made a while back to make Arc stuff better, so this is part of the way that we are a little bit tankier with this setup. As for our other aspect, we are obviously using Consecration, as this is a Consecration spam build. The whole idea is that you slide and then hit a melee. The slide melee will launch you up into the air, it'll do a giant wave of fire, and when you land, another wave will land and ignite everything. This doesn't scale incredibly hard with the melee stat. It does scale with it. The more melee stat you have, the more damage it'll do, but this scales better with increasing your ignition damage and increasing your solar damage overall, so I have focused on that a bit more in this build. As for our fragments, we have Facet of Ruin, increase the size and damage of the burst when you shatter a stasis crystal, frozen target, and you also increase the AoE of your solar ignitions. Just really nice to make your ignitions better. Facet of Protection, because we want more damage resistance, and we are going to be in the middle of everything all the time. Facet of Dawn to make ourselves radiant. Powered melee final blows make you and nearby allies radiant. Because we're going to be getting a lot of powered final blows because of consecration spam, this will actually help our team out. But the more important reason to use that is Facet of Sacrifice. Well, you have an Arc, Solar, or Void buff, which means that the Radiant that you get from the melees, or the Amplified you get from killing stuff, grants you bonus Darkness Transcendence energy. This build does way too much light damage in general, and so this is just a really nice way to increase the amount of Darkness energy we get, because we want to be getting into Transcendence as fast as possible with this build, so that we can spam our abilities even harder. Artifact-wise, we are using the Hunter's Journal, because in my opinion it has some of the best synergy for this build. First up is Energy Diffusion Substrate, just making us a tiny bit tankier. Creeping Chill is in here because not much else in the first column really excites me. If you really like auto rifles, you can put on the auto rifle perk, but otherwise this is just kind of in here in case you ever hit a slowed or frozen target. Void Hegemony is in here because if you ever weaken anything for any reason, you will get little overshields because we have a prismatic subclass on. Once again, if you like auto rifles, you can replace it with the other auto rifle perk. Radiant Orbs is in here because, like I said, we like to have a light buff so that we can get more free darkness energy for getting ability final blows. Solar Fulmination is in here because we want our ignitions to be better, and with Solar Fulmination and the Facet of Ruin, we will have massive AoE ignitions that will destroy enemies. Transfers is in here because mainly we like the increased grenade and melee damage while Transcendence. If you ever get weapon final blows while Transcendent, you do refund light and dark energy. It's really not that strong. We mostly care about the extra damage. And finally, Shield Crush. While you have Woven Mail Frost Armor or a Void Overshield, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. And while you amplified or radiant, your grenade charges faster and deals increased damage. We will sometimes have void over shields. We will typically not have frost armor or woven mail all that often. Like I said, if you use the glacier grenade, you will sometimes get frost armor from the artifact after you shatter it because of using creeping chill. More importantly, because our melee comes back so fast and we're mostly just focusing on it igniting stuff and doing big AoE damage, we care more about getting our grenade more often just so that we can get to Transcendence faster. And inside of Transcendence, it's more about throwing more grenades so they deal more damage so we get more melees back. The whole point of this build is that 80% of the time you are going to be slide meleeing into a consecration ignition to AoE decimate the world around you. If you want to take this build into like a raid or the end of a dungeon, you don't want to change too much about the artifact, you can simply replace Transference or Shield Crush with Sniper's Meditation so that you can have, say, the refurbished A499 sniper on to make sure that you actually do good sniper DPS. Weapon-wise, you can kind of use whatever you want with this build. One mention I will say is the Lotus Eater Rocket Sidearm. It can roll Repulsor Brace destabilizing rounds so that you can AoE debuff stuff with Void stuff, and proc the Repulsor Brace so that you get overshields, which will help you get to the other half of Shield Crush. It's also just a very good weapon that is intrinsically unstoppable, which will just kind of be nice to have overall so that you don't have to get up close and personal and ignite an unstoppable champion to stop them. One last honorable mention, just because I think it's been really fun with this build for me, is the Parasite Heavy Grenade Launcher. This build doesn't struggle to do boss damage because the super does a lot of burst damage, and if the bosses stay on the ground, you can typically just spam consecration on them as well. But Parasite just adds a little bit of extra oomph when you're just trying to find the extra damage to just blow up that one thing that's causing you problems inside of whatever content you're in. I think it's a lot of fun, but like I said, this build doesn't really depend on its weapons. The weapons are just icing on the cake. As for armor sets that I recommend, the Dark Age armor set from Warlord's Ruin is actually pretty okay. It in combats with melee attacks or swords grants the initiative, which gives you handling and reload. Handling means that you ready your weapons faster after you spam your consecration, which just feels nice. More importantly, the 4-piece, when you have the initiative using your class ability, gets a stationary healing aura. The aura gains increased healing based on the number of initiative stacks. Because part of the point of this build is to rotate through your abilities super quickly to get the most out of that inmost light buff, you'll be able to plop these down decently often. It's not the strongest healing, it's mostly just a bonus. Honestly, you'll probably heal more from knockout on average, but it's just kind of a cool thing that can also help your team out. Other armor set bonuses I would recommend is the 2-piece Pharopotent or the 2-piece Smoke Jumper. They're both just kind of good things that will give you generalized damage reduction. The 4-piece Nessus armor set is also very good because of the extra damage resistance that it provides. Also lets you pick up all your ammo for free, which is kind of nice. A recent favorite that I've been enjoying toying around with because I've recently actually started getting it is the armor set from Shattered Throne. However, you have to wait for that dungeon to be featured to farm it at tier 5, so I don't recommend it that much, but it is a fun armor set. Armor stat wise, I like going for exactly 100 melee stat because yes, you can get bonus melee damage out of your melee, but I've done some testing and I'd much rather just focus on getting other stats because it makes the build feel better. I really like getting 200 super so I can make my super slap. However, I do that by getting to 160 and putting 2 super font mods in my helmet. I then like to stack weapon stat as much as possible so that I can have just something to do when I'm actually out of ability spam. Try and get as much grenade and class into the build as you possibly can, but do not worry if you cannot get a ton. The amount of times you spam your melee and the extra regen from the Spirit of Inmost set will really help you just rotate through your abilities faster than you'd think possible. Plus, while you're in Transcendence, you just get extra ability regen anyway, so it's not really worth overthinking how much grenade stat you can fit into this build. I do run heavy-handed for my gloves to make sure that I make orbs when I kill stuff with melee. I do run a grenade font to get my grenade back a little quicker. Impact Induction to get grenade back a little quicker as well. I feel like Impact Induction is very worth slotting into your gloves because of how often you melee. The chest piece just has whatever resist mods you want. Your boots will have whatever surge mods you want. And your class item will have Time Dilation, Reaper, and Powerful Attraction. Because of how often you're trying to be spamming your abilities, you want to have Reaper and Powerful Attraction so that you are making extra orbs when you kill stuff after dodging. By dodging, I mean using your thruster, sorry, Hunter main. And auto picking up all the orbs around you when you activate your thruster. Next up is an Arc Cuirass of the Falling Star build. This build really focuses around throwing down barricades so that you can constantly be getting free bolt charge and trying to charge your super as fast as possible to spam it over and over and over again. There are technically 2 versions of this build, so I'm going to go through this build a little faster than I might the other ones, but also most people know what you would run for this type of build. You run Thunder Crash, you run Rally Barricade, Catapult Lift or whatever jump you prefer, Thunderclap as the melee because I just prefer it, Pulse Grenade, can be personal preference, will matter in a later version, aspect-wise Knockout for a little bit of survivability while you're running around, and Storm's Keep so that whenever you drop your barricade you are generating bolt charge, The neutral game for this build, as you'll probably be seeing in the background right now, is a lot of running around, dropping barricades, and spamming bullets from behind them to constantly proc bolt charge on everything that you can possibly find. Fragment-wise, we have Spark of Resistance to be a little bit tankier, Spark of Ions to make it so that if you jolt stuff, you make ionic traces, which will help you regen your stuff better, Spark of Discharge to make more ionic traces and more bolt charge when you pick up those ionic traces, and Spark of Shock to jolt targets because it synergizes well with our armor choice. Artifact-wise, we use Tablet of Ruin and all of the arc buffs that it can provide for us. Elemental Siphon to make it so that we can make even more ionic traces without having to worry as much about being perfect with our jolting. Dielectric because we want more bolt charge. Gold from Lead just to get more heavy ammo as much as we can get it. Photonic Flare just because it's kind of nice to do the giant AoE blinding bursts, but don't worry about proccing this on purpose. Flash Over because we want our lightning bolts to deal more damage. Limit Break because we will probably almost always be amplified and we want our super to do more damage. And Defib Blast to give ourselves a good chunk of survivability by making our bolt charge bolts both jolt targets and heal us. Weapon conversation does matter a little bit for this build, but I will say this version is a bit more of a 3-person activity version of this build. Say Grandmaster level stuff, any of your conquests, potentially dungeon runs, and in a lot of that type of content, I just like running Wither Horde. It's a nice, just extra bonus passive DPS that you can apply to stuff, and it's just a damn good gun. There are really only 2 primary weapons that I can recommend for this build because of so many reasons. The first up is the Antidate because rewind jolting feedback is really good, and the VS Pyroelectric Propellant because also rewind jolting feedback is really good. If you can't get that roll on these guns, you can get Target Lock on the Antidate because it is just really, really good on a weapon that fires as fast as it does. Frenzy is okay, but not really that exciting, and you can also get Rolling Storm in the first slot. I really, really recommend Rewind, though. It's just so good on this SMG. With the VS Pyroelectric Propellant, if you really want to farm this thing out, Attrition Orbs is good, Target Lock is good, Gear Shift is good, but once again, these are just recommendations as the true best in slot. It's not really that necessary for you to have these exact weapons. These are just what I think are the best possible things for you to use. Use whatever you want. Heavy weapon-wise, I'm also kind of a use whatever you want proponent because it very much depends on whatever your team is using. If you're using rockets, use a rocket launcher like the Hothead where you can get aggregate charge on it. If your team is using precision weapons, just put on the refurbished A499. If your team's using linears, put on the Cataclysmic. Just whatever matches with how your team is trying to play. If you were using this for a raid DPS phase, you could technically replace Defibrillating Blast with Linear Reconstruction to make linear fusion rifles a bit better. At that point, I do highly recommend just using something like Cataclysmic. Armor set wise, I really recommend the Lumino Potent set because you will be jolting a lot of stuff, your bolt charge will be jolting a lot of stuff, and you will get back lots of ability regen, which will make up for the fact that you have very low base stats for your build, for everything that isn't super or weapon damage. Other reason why I recommend jolting feedback weapons so heavily, because it just means that you're making even more ionic traces for your armor set. You can run whatever else you like. I just find for the neutral game heavy version of this build that you want to run in 3-person content, it feels better to have more ionic traces coming in than it does to run something that has straight damage reduction on it. Being able to just sit behind your barricade and constantly bolt charge everything that heals you all the time, in my opinion, is better than just being able to tank damage a tiny bit more. As for armor stats, 160 super and then 2 super fonts on the helmet, as much weapons as you can slap in after that, then as much class as you can put in, then however much grenade and melee can fit in the build after that. As for slots on your armor, double super font on the helmet, typically a harmonic siphon to just save space, firepower and sometimes a grenade font on the gloves, and I'm also typically using bolstering detonation to get extra class ability energy when I damage something with a grenade. The chest piece is just whatever resistance mods you like. The boots are triple damage perks of whatever weapon you're running in your heavy slot, and then typically time dilation, Reaper, powerful attraction for the class item because we are hiding behind our barricade a lot. The alternate version of this build that I recommend is almost identical to the other one with 2 major differences in the subclass. First up is you run Touch of Thunder. This is why Pulse Grenade matters. It makes ionic traces for you. You'll see why in a second. After that, it is Spark of Magnitude in place of jolting grenades because you don't need to jolt with your grenades, as you'll see in a second, and you want longer pulse grenades so that you can have more time making ionic traces from them. As for our artifact, we have swapped the Slayer Bear and Apothecary Satchel because we want the grenade perks on it. Most of this doesn't really matter that much, outside of kinetic impacts and the T3 slot to make it so that our grenade launchers are just doing extra AoE damage when we stick them to something, like say with Anarchy, and Weakened Clear so that we are personally weakening stuff with our grenade launchers. I will say that Weakened Clear does synergize with stuff like Power from Pain, meaning that you can technically get Devour On this version of the build, you just need to be a bit careful with how you do stuff. We also run Trace Evidence to make it so that we get some more Ionic Traces. Void Renewal, because if we ever get Devour active, it's kind of nice, I guess. Curative Orbs, because that way all the Ionic Traces that are coming back to us from our grenade hitting a target will heal us. And Supernova, in case we ever make Void Breaches and pick them up. Once again, a lot of that Void stuff is just kind of a why not in case we ever proc it. The real thing that we care about is the fact that this buffs our grenade launchers. And that's because we are using Salvager Salvo as our main form of damage, with Trickle Charge and Collective Action. In case you don't know, Collective Action gives you a 33% damage buff to this gun, and Trickle Charge means as long as you're standing behind a barricade, you will never have to reload it. I also pair this with the Heavy Exotic Anarchy. I don't actually have the catalyst for it, but if you did, that would be a great way for you to constantly proccing Jolt yourself. And right after this, I'll show some gameplay footage of what the DPS phase with this would look like. I use the exact same armor mods, armor sets, and armor stats between these two builds. I just changed stuff up a little bit because this will be a DPS version of the build. Keep in mind you cannot hot swap between these two builds because they use different aspects, meaning you will lose your super that you have charged. So don't think you can hot swap between these two builds. They're just two slight variations on the same build. You can use whichever one you want and whichever piece of content you want. The DPS this build provides isn't insane, but it is very consistent and is very easy to do. The next build we have up here is the Hazardous Propulsion build. Weapon precision hits or final blows have a chance to load a kinetic micro missile. Activating your class ability fires the loaded micro missiles, damaging your target, temporarily increases the damage with other micro missiles and rocket launchers. Very fun exotic. This build is mostly just a neutral game, run around and have a good time build. It's not really set up to do anything other than that. Subclass-wise, this is going to look pretty familiar compared to other builds we have done. Rally Barricade, Catapult Lift, Thunderclap, Pulse Grenade, Thunder Crash, Storm's Keep, Knockout. Just basically the exact same thing that the Thunder Crash build used. Most of the fragments are the same as well, with some very slight changes. Spark of Resistance, Spark of Ions, Spark of Discharge, and Spark of Magnitude. I just kind of prefer Magnitude in this because I want my grenade to do a little more AoE damage. Also, we are not running Limited Potent with this set, so we do not care as much about making sure that we are creating as many jolted enemies as possible. There's a few options weapon-wise, but I really have settled onto one particular loadout with this. I like using the Mint Retrograde, typically with something like Bait and Switch or Elemental Honing, and then something like Envious Arsenal or Rewind Rounds. Just a workhorse of a weapon that gets buffed by all the micro missiles that you will be shooting out when you pop your class ability. The Turncoat Exotic Hand Cannon. I'm sure some of you know that this actually has a bug on it right now to where if you activate its fancy alternate fire mode, it actually buffs the damage from the micro missiles from Hazardous Propulsion. As far as we know, that's probably not getting fixed anytime soon. If it does ever get fixed, oh well, the build functions just fine without that bug existing. It really only doubles or triples the damage of the micro missiles, which never did that much in the first place. It is kind of funny though, so if you want to do that aspect of it, go ahead. I just like using the Turncoat for this build because it feels really, really good. Heavy weapon-wise, you are probably just going to be using some form of rocket launcher. If you're using this in team-based content, hopefully someone has a Yallarhorn for you. If not, just use a rocket launcher. It's getting buffed by the extra stuff from Hazardous Propulsion. It's just quite nice. You'll usually be just hanging out behind your barricade with stacks of bolt charge anyways. You'll probably be pretty safe to just be sitting there launching rockets at whatever is in your way. We are on the Tablet of Ruin as far as artifacts go because it has good stuff for Arc and Void in it. It also has Perpetual Destruction as a T1 for some reason. Rapid final blows with non-exotic rocket launches, refund ammo, and increase reload speed. This is just kind of nice. If you're using a rocket launcher anyways because of Hazardous Propulsion, this is just free ammo and free reload speed. Dielectric's in here because if we hit stuff with Bolt Charge, it counts as being arc debuffed, which means we're refunding Bolt Charge. And if we rapidly defeat stuff that's been hit by the Bolt Charge, we get orbs and heal a tiny bit. It won't happen all that often, but it's still nice. Volatile Marksman's in here because it synergizes really well with Turncoat, just even more volatile everywhere. Turncoat just kind of makes stuff volatile on its own, giving it volatile rounds means twice the volatile. Maligned Harvest is also in here because you're going to apply a lot of volatile, and then you will also make giant AoE weakening bursts. Applying Weaken can also give you a little bit of overshield, which provides some much needed survivability for the build. We still have flashover in the build because we want our lightning bolts to deal more damage, and we're going to be stacking bolt charge by heading behind our barricade anyway, so that's just nice to have. Defibrillating blast is in here because bolt charge is just really strong, and being able to heal extra, kind of, between this and dielectric is just really nice. Plus, you'll probably be stunning champions in most higher end content, getting just free bolt charge. It's just a really good artifact perk. We do have limit break in here. You can replace this with lots of other stuff if you want to. We really only have about 100 super in my version of the build because we have put so much into weapons. But it is nice to have your Thunder Crash do a little bit of extra base damage. Armor set wise, I just kind of recommend survivability sets. Smoke Jumper, Ferropotent are classics. 4-piece Nessus set is a classic. 4-piece Techian set from the Shattered Throne dungeon I'm also going to start recommending a bit more now that I actually have some time playing with it. It is a pretty fun and strong armor set. I've been enjoying using it a lot on other builds, and I think it would work pretty well with this build to just have a bit of flat damage reduction once you get to the maximum stacks from that armor set. As for armor stats and armor mods, I like 200 weapons. This is a very weapon-focused build. We want as much weapon damage as possible. Plus, this means that we will never be running out of ammo for our rocket launchers or our rocket pulses, which are pretty ammo-hungry weapons. After that, I like to get a good chunk of super. I typically like to hit at least 100 to get it to be regen as fast as possible, and I'll typically run some super font mods in my helmet to make it deal a bit more damage. After that, I like to focus on the class stat, because if I can get a bunch of class ability, it means I can hide behind barricades more often and then drop them to spawn micro missiles more often. After that, it's grenade, because just throwing more grenades is always good. Shax would be proud. Then whatever melee you can fit into the build after that. Armor mods, like I said, super fonts are pretty good. Whatever siphons you can stick into the build is nice. You could also potentially do something more like this, where you're running like Heavy Finder and Heavy Scout and then a Void Siphon, so that you can make a bunch of heavy ammo for both yourself and your team, and use a Void Siphon to make orbs with your turncoat. There are options to this. I prefer just getting my super to deal more damage, and making orbs by spamming my rocket launcher. And the gloves, I'll run a grenade font to get a little bit of extra grenade energy to throw them more often, firepower so that any kills make orbs, while string detonation to get more class ability energy. Chest piece usually has whatever defensive mods you can stick in it. Boots have whatever font mods or surge mods you want to be using. At the moment, I have some Void Weapon Surge mods in there because I like boosting how much my turncoat does. I think it's just funny and fun. If I was trying to be more optimal, I'd probably put arc boosts to boost my Hothead rocket launcher, but that's preference. Class item, you're going to see another classic here. Reaper, Time Dilation, Powerful Attraction. 3 of the best things to be sticking in your class item at all times, especially ones that focus around using your class ability as often as this one does. As for our final build here, we will be running Wishful Ignorance. If you don't know how this exotic works, you gain an additional Frenzied Blade charge. Frenzied Blade and Flechette Storm briefly increase their damage with each strike. Also from your Banner of War, return melee energy based on the number of allies healed. This is generally just an upgrade for base Strand Titan, if you want to stay purely Strand, which is part of the point of this build. I, however, very much enjoy using Praxic Blade with this build for reasons that I'll go into as we go on, but I will also give you an alternate artifact that is not the solely Praxic Blade artifact, if you prefer to use Wishful Ignorance with something like a Rocket Pulse. Subclass-wise, we are obviously on Strand, and as a result of that, we have one option for our super, Blade Fury. It is actually quite good with this, because in case you don't know, after you exit Blade Fury, you will have all of your melee charges back, which synergizes very well with spamming all of them with Wishful Ignorance. Possibility-wise, I like Barricade, Catapult Lift for Jump, Frenzied Blade because we don't have a choice, but also we like it anyways. I've been going back and forth lately on which grenade to use. I feel like for more casual content, Grapple is the undisputed choice. Once you start getting into harder content, I feel like Shackle Grenade is absolutely well worth its weight. The difference between being able to just run towards a group of enemies that have already been suspended versus flying towards them grappling and not having them suspended can be a real big difference maker when the enemies hit a lot harder than they normally would. Aspect-wise, we are obviously using Flechette Storm to get the most out of Wishful Ignorance, while Sliding activates your charged melee ability to leap into the air, knocking nearby targets away and dealing damage, while Airborne activates your charged melee again to launch a cluster of damaging, unraveling projectiles. Repeatedly activating this will chain additional throws. You can spam this for a lot of damage. It's not as strong as it used to be. It used to be so strong that it was actually what people were using for DPS inside of 5 feet raids. As for our other aspect, it is most obviously Banner of War for so many reasons, between the extra survivability, the extra melee and sword damage, and the synergy that it has with Wishful Ignorance. In case you don't know how this functions, defeat a target with a melee attack, finisher, or sword to raise a Banner of War that pulses with energy, periodically healing and increasing melee and sword damage. Targets defeated by you and nearby allies, charge the banner, increasing the speed of its pulses. This stacks up to 4 times and increases your damage up to those little stacks. It stacks on top of other things. It is quite nice for just running around with swords out and just having a grand old time. It does not keep you alive as well as it used to. It's had a couple of little adjustments over the years, but it's still very good for your survivability. Fragment-wise, we have Thread of Fury to give ourselves more melee energy, Thread of Transmutation to make it so that we make more tangles, Thread of Warding so that we get Woven Mail from picking up orbs, and Thread of Generation to make our grenade come back just that little bit faster. Artifact-wise, I like using the Encrypted Data Disk. I like using Fierce Proxemics because just a little bit of grenade and melee energy back when you finish something is nice. Kinetic Synthesis because we are going to be using Praxic Blade, so we just get free ammo all the time from hitting stuff. Combination Argent Blade to give us a little bit of bonus damage if we add that little pause in between our light attacks. Singularity Blade because sometimes you'll get void buffs from either yourself or your allies, and then you'll be able to do the weakening bursts. And Power from Pain because if you can get those at the right time, get something weakened to get you Devour, you then permanently have the void buff because it'll be quite easy to keep Devour up on this build, meaning that you just get to keep reprocking Devour with kills and reprocking the weakened AoEs with Singularity Blade. The final two are also very standard for this type of build. Storm Sword combo. Sword Storm combo? Why'd they have to make these things so complicated? Forming 3 sword light attacks followed by heavy summons penumbral blades around you that damage and disorient combatants. This is incredibly powerful, and it takes your damage with the Praxic Blade from okay to incredibly good. These things will also proc any on-kill effects that you have, so it'll be reprocking Banner of War, it'll be reprocking Devour if you have that up, and any number of things like that. Finally, we have Kinetic Rupture. Kinetic weapon damage against a powerful combatant has a chance to create a Kinetic Rupture. Targeting this rupture causes a damaging explosion that staggers combatants. It's stronger against unstops, but who cares? Everything is strong against unstops. It's just a little bit of bonus damage that you'll occasionally proc if you can manage to pop it while you're running around with your saber. Weapon-wise, we are obviously going to be using the Praxic Blade for this iteration of the build. I really like using Balanced Form for most combat because the extra weapon ammo and health regen on Rapid Vital Blows is really nice, plus you're allowed to shred your way through all the little enemies. In higher end content, you can switch to Offensive Form if you want to make sure that you're doing more against bosses and just make sure that you're not running out of ammo by smacking something, but more often than not, Offensive Form's bonus ammo is nothing compared to Kinetic Synthesis. Forceful Blade to improve the impact. Impact Core, it severs targets. It's not the greatest part of the Praxic Blade, but severing stuff while you're in melee range means that they are dealing less damage to you, increasing your survivability a little bit. Very importantly, Hyperblade is the exotic trait that we are going to be using with this because blocking will give us Amplified. Being Amplified gives you damage reduction and makes you even tankier than you would be otherwise, taking this build from pretty good to incredibly good because otherwise we have no ways of getting Amplified on this build. As for weapons to pair with it, use kind of whatever you want. I typically run my Antidate because I just love using this on my Titan. I'll often put on the refurbished A499 as my heavy weapon because if I make a Kinetic Rupture on a target, I'll just shoot it with a sniper to do extra AoE damage. It's also just good for medium to long range stuff. Obviously adjust as needed for whatever champions are in content you're in, but don't forget that when you're in your super, you easily suspend stuff, taking care of unstoppables. If you don't want to use Praxic Blade with this build, which is understandable, a lot of people are kind of over the lightsaber, Implement of Curiosity is my recommendation for your artifact. You can get stuff like Horde Shuttle, which means that every time you damage an unravel target with a weapon, you will spawn Threadlings. You will unravel stuff with your melees when you use your Flechette Storm, so do not worry about how you will proc the unraveling without unraveling rounds in the artifact. You will proc unraveling. Combine that with Pack Tactics to make any Threadlings you make be even stronger. Threaded Blast means that if you destroy a tangle with a strand weapon, it does better, which is just kind of nice if this tangle is somewhere that you don't really want to be. You can just shoot it for a big AoE of damage. Elemental Coalescence to make it so that you just have a better chance at making more tangles. More tangles means you get to throw them to get more energy. You can shoot them to do bigger AoE explosions, all sorts of little things like that. You're probably using Mint Retrograde if you're using this version of the build, so Energy Acceleration is in here to make it so that Mint Retrograde is just that little bit better. Shield Crush here at the end to make it so that your melee is even stronger. You can use Praxic Blade with this version too to make it so that when you get the amplified version you can get the grenade regen, but it's really not that important. This is entirely just so that your melees regen faster and do more damage. Tangled Web is in here because it's a little bit of crowd control. You're going to make a lot of tangles between all the different ways that you can, and so just auto-suspending stuff is pretty nice. Like I said, you're probably using Mint Retrograde with this build, so Mint Retrograde plus whatever primary you want. This does open up a lot of slots to be your exotic otherwise. You could put on exotic heavy to do more damage, like say a Tractor Cannon to debuff stuff before you pop Flechette Storm, or something like Lemon Arc in order to do better distance damage so that you're not having to always be up in the middle of everything. This build is very open-ended because so much of what you want to be doing is simply baked into your kit as your melee ability. As for armor set bonuses, just use whatever you want. This build is so self-sufficient. I've been running it where my set bonus is just the Lustrous set bonus, which doesn't really do anything. Receiving Healing grants my solar weapons better stats. I don't even use solar weapons in this build, so I get nothing out of my armor set bonus right now. If you want an armor set that gives you more survivability, the Nessus 4-piece set, the Shattered Throne 4-piece set are both pretty okay in terms of just the amount of damage reduction they provide for you. Also, as is tradition, recommend Ferropotent armor and Smoke Jumper armor. But this build has so much damage reduction and survivability in it, you typically don't even need armor sets to help with that, but if you want some, there are options. As for armor stats and armor mods, obviously we like as much melee as possible, typically 160, so you just put double fonts on your gloves to hit that 200 stat. After that, I typically like going for super. My super is actually a little high for what I normally like it to be at. I'd prefer more weapons, but Blade Fury is a really powerful super that does a lot of damage and will just rip through bosses and crowds of mobs much quicker than you'd realize. So having a ton of super energy is not a bad thing. Weapon stat, I like to be generally high so that my Praxic blade does a lot of damage, but it doesn't really need a ton of support, but as much as you can put into it is good. After that, grenade is the next stat to worry about, and finally class. Class and health are both kind of throwaway stats on this build because you're probably never going to be sitting behind your barricade. As for armor mods, I like to put a kinetic siphon in my helmet so that I'm making orbs, so that I can constantly have my fonts available. I like using super fonts on the helmet for more super energy. Gloves I like heavy-handed so that my melee kills make orbs, and then melee fonts so that I can get to that 200 stat. Chest piece is whatever resistance mods you want and need for whatever content you're in. These are very malleable. On the boots, it's double kinetic weapon surge so that my lightsaber does more damage, and then invigoration so I get back melees more frequently. The class item is actually different for once. I know, this like never happens. It's going to be Reaper so that you get to make orbs if you pop your barricade, and then double outreach to get more melee back whenever you pop your class ability. So whenever you do feel like popping your class ability is a good thing, you'll actually get melees back. So you can spam Flechette Storm and Frenzied Blade more often. Shove the honorable mentions at the end of the video this time to keep y'all on your toes. First up is Hollow Fire Heart. I just could not click with this. I don't know what it is, because you don't know how it got updated, because it did get changed recently. While your Solar Super is charged, ability Final Blows cure you and give you stacks of Sunfire Furnace. Sunfire Furnace is active, grenade and shield burst final blows trigger ignitions. Each stack increases grenade regeneration, class ability regeneration, and super damage. That super damage part is important. Upon exiting your super, all stacks are converted into super energy. It stacks up to like 10 times, and when you exit your super, you'll get like half of it back. It's really cool conceptually. The bonus super damage is nothing to sneeze at. I tried this on some dungeon bosses and ripped away like half of their health bar without much effort. Only using this and a tractor, like 200 super, fully stacked furnace, and a tractor. It was really easy, but I just don't think I click with it. I don't know what it is. Something about the loop that you do with this just doesn't feel good to me, and it just kind of feels like a different variant on using Worm God Bonk Hammer, where instead of just stacking with hammer final blows to get big melee damage, you stack ability final blows to get big super damage, and I don't know, maybe it's just not for me. This build does exist and is out there, though. I'm sure you can find tons of videos on it. It's just not my favorite thing, and that's why I didn't make it into this list. The second honorable mention we got here is Stasis Blastwave Striders. This one's really fun and really silly with just everything that Stasis Titan can do now, especially with a 4-piece 7th Seraph armor set, but it's not super for me. In case you don't know what it does and you want to explore more about this exotic and builds around it, you gain resistance to your explosives, defeat targets to charge this armor. Once charged, land a Shiver Strike melee attack, or deal explosive self-damage to rocket jump backwards and release a blast wave with deadly shrapnel projectiles. The way it freezes combatants and slows guardians, charged rocket jumps grant frost armor. This basically just means you kill some stuff, you shoot yourself at your feet with a grenade launcher of some variety, like a mountaintop or a theodolite, or you hit a Shiver Strike and you do a giant AoE blast of stasis damage that does really, really big damage, to be fair. I had a lot of fun with it. I used it in a lot of the stuff from Renegades, where the enemies get to be super tanky by the end of it, and it was pretty fun in those activities, but it feels like such overkill for most of the game. And it also just feels really pigeonholed in how you have to play it, and you have to get so close to the enemies that it's not always the best option with how Stasis doesn't have the largest amount of survivability to it at the moment. If you run certain artifacts, you do get to heal off stasis shards, and that made it feel a little better, but if you don't have any shards, you're just kind of dead in the water with just a giant pile of DR from your frost armor. I also just don't like the current rotation of how Stasis Titan feels, where it's just a lot of slide melee, slide melee, slide melee, with very little thought in between because of how fast your melee regenerates. Once again, this is just personal preference. I'm just explaining why this build didn't make the video, and why I'm not a huge fan of it, and not going to make a build for it most likely. And that's the end of this Titan build video. These are the 4 builds that I typically rotate between when I'm playing the game. They're a lot of fun. This is actually the most fun I've had on Titan in a hot minute. I don't know if it's just having access to all the artifacts again, or just finally embracing learning how to punch better. Well, thanks for hanging out and watching. Obviously, there will only be a certain amount of Destiny videos to go up on this channel in the near future because we have no foreseeable updates. But if you like the content that you see, hang around. I make similar content for other games that I play, including roguelikes and roguelites. I like to play a lot of indie games on the channel. Deadlock is a general mainstay. But either way, thanks for hanging out and watching. Y'all are all cool and I appreciate you, and I hope to catch you all in the next one.